In this video, I'm going to talk about how the world in a text adventure is modeled under the hood. If you understand this, it will really help you craft better scenarios in your game. You'll really be able to manipulate the world or alter it in ways that make your game function and do what you want it to do. So let's take a look at that in this video. And then let's just start by reviewing a couple of concepts here. So objects in your game have properties and attributes. So the properties are just bit flags. They're either yes or no, on or off, 0 or 1, and those control how we interact with an object. Is it portable? Can I put things in it? Can I put things on it? Is it locked, or can I open it? Sort of yes or no things. Those are your properties. And then objects also have attributes, and the attributes can have a value between 0 and 255. And if you can set something with a drop-down menu, it's an attribute. So the attributes really kind of configure how this object is or where this object is in the world. Or, for example, if I go north from a room, where do I end up? So the attributes kind of control mostly how the object is hooked up to the other objects in the world versus, how do you interact with them? Now, there's a couple of other attributes that aren't related to location. The description and the initial description and the mass are attributes. And there's one that's we're going to be using a lot when we get into the coding, and that is the holder or the parent attribute. That's who has this object, where is this object in the world. So the fact that an object can have a parent object, which is kind of referred to as the holder or the parent or the location, that has the interesting effect of turning our world into a tree structure, a giant upside down tree. So let's take a look at that tree. And if you understand that, then you can do all sorts of cool tricks. So the game, every object has a parent object, but what about the rooms? What's the parent object of the rooms? Who kind of is the top of the food chain? Who's the root of the tree or the anchor of the world? That's a special location called off screen. And anytime you create a project, you will see that object 0 is off screen, and then object 1 is the player, and then everything else comes after that. So object 0 is off screen. That is a special object. It is the root of the entire world. And it's also worth talking about here that there's no difference between objects and locations and NPCs or characters. They're all just objects internally. It's just one line in a data table. So think about a barrel. A barrel is an object, right? You could pick it up, but you could also get in the barrel, in which case it's a place. So there's really not that much distinction of a place versus an object. And again, where something is in the world is specified using the holder property. But there's two other synonyms for it. I stole the term holder from Inform 7, and then later I just turned out I didn't like the term holder. It didn't seem to describe it very well. I think the term parent is better, or location that's also better. That's also an improvement. So parent and dot location are synonyms for dot holder. So when you see the dot here, read that as the apostrophe S. Coin dot holder equals player. Like the coin's holder is now the player. The coin's parent is now the player. The coin's location is now the player. Those are all the same three things. They're just synonyms. When you compile your code, parent and location just get text substituted into the word holder. So there's no difference at all. But that parent property, that holder property, that's who owns the item. That's sort of where it is in the world. So let's take a look at our tree and kind of visualize that. So there's our tree, and notice that we've got off screen at the very top of the tree. Or imagine if you flip this picture upside down, you have then you have something that looks like a tree. It's really an upside down tree. So off screen is this special object that is the anchor for everything in the world. So usually the rooms will have off screen as their parent. So the dead end, the long tunnel, the cave, and the twisty passage, they have to be in the world somehow. So their parent object is off screen. Now the player has to be somewhere in the world. So let's look at this scenario here. So the player's parent is the cave. That means the player is in the cave. The player is being held by the cave. The player's holder is the cave. And the cave's holder is off screen. So the parent is, inside of the cave, and the cave is inside of off screen, or off screen has a cave and the cave has a player. You could kind of read it the other way. And what if the player's carrying something like a lantern or a rusty sword? Well, the lantern and the rusty sword both have the player as their parent. So the rusty sword is in the player, which is in the cave, which is in off screen. And the lantern is in the player, which is in the cave, which is off screen. Now, the player will never actually be able to get off screen, or should not be able to get off screen, because then the player would see all the rooms. If you were in off screen, it would say you see a dead end. There is a dead end here, there is a long tunnel here, there is a cave here, there is a twisty passage here. It'd be kind of like you had pulled down the curtain, but the wizard's curtain, and now you could see what was going on behind the scenes. Now, what if we wanted to remove an object from the world that the player was exploring? Maybe we wanted to make the coins disappear, or the lantern disappear, or the rusty sword disappear. How would you do that? Maybe there's a monster you kill and it vaporizes and disappears, or there's a ghost that disappears that was in the world, now it's not in the world. How do you remove something from the world? Well, you just set the holder of that object, or that object's parent, to be off screen, and now it's gone, right? The player will never find it because it's kind of been removed from the part of the world that the player can see. So you can think of off screen as a special object that you can use as a storage location for placing things that you're going to need later in your game. And I'm going to give you some scenarios, some examples of that, some of those scenarios later on. Now, imagine I want to test to see. Maybe I'm going to try to move, right? But maybe if I'm in a cave with a monster, the monster blocks the exit. So like this is the troll scenario from Zork. So how do you test to see if two things are in the same place, right? Well, in the same place means they have the same parent, or they have the same location, or they have the same holder. So to test whether the player's in the same room as the monster here, we can say, is the player's holder equal to the monster's holder, right? Or is the player's location equal to the monster's location? And if that's true, that means they're in the same room, because from the player's perspective, the player's parent is the room the player's in. So you can test to see, are two things in the same place by comparing their parent objects, or their holders. Now let's look at an example of using off-screen as a place to stash things that we're going to need later. And as I said before, you can put something there. You can set something's parent to be off screen, and now it's removed from the visible world. And to pop it into the world, you just change its holder property to be the place where you want it to be. So I call this the switcheroo. So let's talk about like the switcheroo. So maybe there's some magic word you say and a sword appears in your inventory. So maybe you say some command and you run this function that you wrote, and it says what it does is it sets the sword's holder to be the player. Right? This is a statement. The sword's holder is the player. Semicolon, end of statement. So what we've done is we have now put the sword in the player's inventory. We could have also said sword.parent equals player. The sword's parent is the player. The sword is now in the player, basically, or is dangling off of the player in that tree structure. And then print the line poof, and then print the line a sword just appeared in your inventory. So what we've done is we had that sword off screen, and when something happened, we teleported it into the player's inventory, or we could have teleported it anywhere, and now it's there. So let's look at a different scenario. Maybe you have a match, right? And it burns for 3 turns, and now it's burned down and it's gone, right? The match is gone. We can move the match off screen, and now we change the match's holder to be off screen. Now it's gone from the world. All right. You can also use this trick to model an object kind of going through a sequence or a series of states. So imagine you've got a lantern, right? And it's got a battery and it lasts for a certain number of turns. So when you have it initially, it's a brightly shining lantern, but then after 10 turns, the battery's getting low, right? So what you can do is teleport the brightly shining lantern out of the world and put the dimly shining lantern into the player's inventory. You've switched those objects out. And now, from the player's point of view, the brightly shining lantern has become a dimly shining lantern. But it's not the same object. It's a little shell game that you played where you pulled one object out of the world and replaced it with an object that had a slightly different description. And then maybe after a certain number of turns, maybe the lantern burns out. So we take the dim lantern, the dimly lit lantern, we move that out of the world by changing its parent to be off screen. And then we take the dead lantern, which is off screen, and we put it in the player's inventory. So we've got this to the player. It just seems like the battery's running out. But what we've done is we kind of do the switcheroo with objects. That's one way to do that. You can change the description on an object on the fly. Like, the description is a property on objects, so you could say lantern.description equals whatever. The lantern is shining dimly, like the lantern is dead. So, but this is certainly one way to do it. If you've played Lost Pig, this is probably how that is being modeled. You know, when there's a pig running around, and when you can pick up the pig eventually, and if you check your inventory, it will say you have a pig, unhappy in parentheses. Where did parentheses unhappy come from? Well, there's a pig object, and there's also a pig unhappy object. That so when you pick up the pig is actually moved off screen, and the unhappy pig is put in your inventory. So again, it's that switcheroo thing. Imagine you have a guard and you have to shoot him with a laser pistol or phaser, and he falls dead on the ground or something. What you can do is you can have a guard and a dead guard, and when you kill the guard, you move the guard off screen and you move the dead guard to the guards where the guard was by changing their holders or their parents or their locations. It's all the same thing. And now what you've done is, from the player's point of view, the guard has now fallen over dead, right? But really what you did was exchange one object for another. Maybe there's a lock on a door. You hit the lock with the sledgehammer, and now what you do is you print the lock flies off the door, and you take the lock and you move it off screen, and you move the broken lock and you move that to the player's location. And now from the player's point of view, it just seems like, right, I smashed the lock and that's on the floor now. But what you did was exchange one object and switch it out for another object. A kind of a classic example of this is the boat in Zork, the inflatable rubber boat. And so there's a pile of rubber with a valve on it that you can inflate to turn into a boat, but you can deflate it later. Now it turns out that the boat and the deflated boat are actually two separate objects. So when you deflate the boat, the boat is moved off screen, and the deflated boat is put into your inventory. But if you had put stuff in the boat and deflated it, that boat would still have all of its child objects, all of its children. Everything that was in the boat before is still in the boat, but the boat got moved off screen. Later, if you reinflated the boat would pop back into the world and inflate, and all your stuff would be there. So the boat was kind of turned into this magical bag of holding, and I don't know if they actually meant it to be that way, but that's kind of how it turned out. And that was, Dave Lebling talks about that in the Zork post-mortem, the GDC talk, which is a very good talk. If you haven't watched that, you should go watch that. So let's wrap up here and just kind of recap what we talked about. So the world of your text adventure is organized into a conceptual tree with off-screen, a special object called off-screen as the root of the tree. And off-screen can be used as a storage closet, a location to just stash things or put things there until you need them later in the game. Like an NPC, a wizard who's going to pop up 20 turns and later, keep him off screen. When you need the wizard, change his holder property, and now he'll be in the world. And you can do the trick of, if you need an object that's going to go through multiple states or transition through a series of states, you can model that one object using several objects and keep the unused states off screen and switch them out as needed to make it appear like that torch is burning down, or that lantern is running out of battery power. So if you just understand it, you can test if things are in the same location by comparing their parents, or move something around the world by changing its parent. Then you can create this kind of cool universe where things seem to happen and appear out of nowhere and disappear and change. And it seems like magic, but it's really just a big object tree that you are manipulating by changing the location of the objects. So that's it. So hope that helps clarify how that works. If you have any questions about that, just email me, tap me on the shoulder, and message me through Schoology, and I will be happy to go over that again.